Welcome to the Hope Sports Podcast, where we believe sport can give you the freedom to be your best. All too often, the fear of failure takes the fun out of the game. We're here to help you discover real joy and freedom to compete your best. I'm your host, Olympic gold medalist Laura Wilkinson. I can't wait to jump into today's conversation, but before I do, I want to tell you about a really cool way that people are engaging with this podcast. We're giving a big ol' shout out to Courtney Spencer's 7th grade writing class at Maybank Junior High in Texas. Courtney found the Hope Sports Podcast and created an entire project around it. Her students have been listening to different episodes and then writing the athletes from those episodes they listened to with what they learned. And we are loving it. You guys are amazing. Keep believing in your dreams and pursuing purpose, and you guys are bound to change the world. Speaking of believing in your dreams, we have such an inspiring guest on today. Abbey Cooper is the most decorated Ivy League track and distance runner. She has 7 NCAA titles and runs professionally with Team New Balance. But she's most well known, perhaps, for what was named the most beautiful moment of the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio. In the preliminary race of the 5,000 meters, Abbey was tripped up when another runner fell in front of her. But instead of continuing on, she went back to pick up the other woman to finish the race. Her actions are the epitome of sportsmanship, and they represent the heart of the Olympics. And today on the show, she shares the story behind that moment. She shares her less than perfect run up to the Olympic Games and her own struggle to recover from an injury. And through it all, she shines this incredible humility that I'm so excited to share with you. So let's dive on in. Abbey Cooper, welcome to the Hope Sports Podcast. It is such an honor to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Laura. It's an honor to be here.
Okay, well, let's just kind of start with what made you fall in love with running. Kind of take us there.
I have kind of an interesting background where I really, I didn't start off running when I was like 3 years old and road races or anything like that. I grew up in a family of runners. Both my mom and dad, I was growing up, ran marathons, and my mom was actually a triathlete as well. So I was raised in an enthusiast, kind of exercise enthusiast environment. I was actually a swimmer growing up. I swam competitively through 8th grade. And when freshman year in high school rolled around, honestly, the reason I first went to cross country practice was because it was the only sport that I didn't have to try out for. I had never been on a sport with individuals who were so much older than me. And I know that I was a bit intimidated by that. And so I didn't even want to get out of the car the first day of practice, but very quick found that it was such a welcoming and jovial group of girls, and quite a big team actually too. So it felt like a family, and learned pretty early on that I had a natural talent for it. Just worked out.
Oh, that's so cool. I love it. Was there a specific moment, do you think, in or out of competition that kind of changed the trajectory of your running career?
Well, I think there were probably a series of those in the time that I've been running. My first couple of years in high school, I had quite a bit of success those first 2 years. Where I actually ran my best times my sophomore year in high school, and had continuous coaches those first 2 years. And then after, I think it was between my sophomore and junior year in high school, we started having quite a few coaching changes, even within seasons. And I started to struggle with some health problems with mono and anemia. So running wasn't going quite as well for me those last 2 years, and, school was getting harder. So although I was still an active participant, and team captain, and still very involved with the team, my love of it started to just become a bit more, there were ebbs and flows, I think, in how enjoyable it was. Then again, I think that was now as I look back, it was a blessing in disguise, because it really set my heart on competing in college and looking forward to this new start where I was going to be around people a whole team of people who were equally as invested in the sport and in their academics. I loved my high school team, but there weren't many of us who were looking to compete at a more serious level. Yeah, really, my first 2 years of college were just exploring what it was like to buy into this mentality as, running is not just an extracurricular activity, but actually a lifestyle. And what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? So that really changed my trajectory, in that I was able to more fully realize my potential. And over the course of those first two years, I was actually quite surprised by, the jumps I was able to make in my performance, as well as love of the sport, where I had never imagined at all. My goal entering freshman year was to just contribute to the team and be able to score points. So when I qualified for, a national championship and then was able to go on after that, I was quite, that was not anything that I had expected. So it happened pretty quickly. And, yeah, just, over the course of those 4 years, that's when I grew to realize that I was capable of competing on an even grander scale and, look toward professional running. So I'm really thankful for my coaching and, just the support system around me that embedded that, allowed me the resources to realize that and grow in such deep ways.
So who was that support system? Like, was it just a coach? Was it the whole team? Was it one person in particular? Like, yeah, who really kind of helped you grow and change and like you said, really make that your lifestyle?
Right. So yeah, it was a collection of amazing people. Of course, my family was behind me the entire time, really, in allowing me to choose the school, where, there are not athletic scholarships, at Ivy League schools. So, that was a huge sacrifice on their part. So it started there. And then, I was actually recruited by a different coach than my collegiate coach, Mark Coogan. He, yeah. The other coach had gotten pregnant and resigned the summer before we arrived on campus, but then found out that, Mark had an incredible uh, experience and background being an Olympian himself. And he was really a great fit for our team at the time, and helped us learn how to ask more of ourselves and believe we had the potential to be a national caliber team. So he, again, was hugely instrumental. And just really, I had no idea what it looked like, from a physical standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, emotional, to compete at that level. So he planted the seeds, and he was also a perfect balance personality wise, where I'm by nature a type A personality and he's avowedly type B. And so, or I tend to overdo it, he's was always there to balance me out and help me to remember the joy of it when I started to get a little bit too dialed in and kind of a just self-destructive way. So, and then, aside from my incredible teammates, who are still some of my best friends to this day, I think one other huge component of my support system in college was the faith community. That was really, in college was where I came to faith. There were a lot of Christian groups on campus, but the one I was most connected to was called FCA, which I'm sure many listeners are familiar with it. But yeah, I had great discipleship and mentorship through that program, and really just learned what a personal relationship with Jesus could be, in part through my experiences, but then also the way I was drawn to the people in that community. And so, yeah.
Well, it's interesting
so
to me that
grateful.
that you said you came to faith there and through Fellowship of Christian Athletes, but why did you start going if you didn't already have that faith? Like, what brought you there?
That's a great question. So I did grow up in the church. I was raised in a Catholic home, and you know, had spent like we were regular churchgoers, and I attended CCD, and um, I had a very much an intellectual understanding
Mm-hmm.
of who God was, and as a firstborn, as a natural perfectionist, I kind of understood God as, prescribing a set of rules that I had to follow. And I was always good at following rules. So it really was kind of a works-based um, understanding uh, there. And then, when I started to struggle in high school with my health and running wasn't going as well and school was harder, it just became less intriguing to me because, if I'm not reaching that standard that
Mm-hmm.
God is supposedly setting, of course, I'm going to run the other way if I don't know who He is. And I didn't really at that time. So uh, entering college, I had a few teammates actually, which is amazing to think back of such a small team. I had multiple teammates who were believers and um, were regular, members of FCA and would invite me to the Bible studies and larger group gatherings. And I'd gone, not on a regular basis, but again, I had um, this just, I was enticed by the people there, the message that I heard. Um, and Yeah, I just sensed that it was real for those involved. And it wasn't until um, I started to experience the pressure that came with the success I was experiencing in running and in school, um, and the sense of internal emptiness that I felt. It wasn't until then that I really started to seek help from that, um, all that I had heard, that who Jesus was and the freedom that He provided. So that's really when it started to become personal.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. And you did have a very successful collegiate career. You were the most decorated Ivy League track and cross country runner. You won 7 NCAA titles. That's insane. So, where did your pursuit of the Olympics begin in all of this?
So in 2012, of course, that was an Olympic year. I had just finished my sophomore year in college, and another teammate of mine, Alexi Pappas, had also, she was a senior that year, and she and I both qualified for the Olympic trials in Eugene, and she in the steeplechase, and I'd qualified in the 5,000. So we really just went to that race. As I said, we were done with our academics. I was living on campus at Dartmouth that summer. So we just enjoyed that as kind of like an opportunity, as coach would call it, icing on the cake at the end of our
Mm-hmm.
season. He had spoken, of course, so fondly of his experiences in college, at the Olympics, but then in college at the Olympic trials. And how much of a benefit it was to kind of be an underdog in that environment. And so we both were able to compete there. And I very honestly I mean, again, I told you I was surprised myself many times by what I was able to accomplish in college. But I think that experience at the 2012 trials trumps all in terms of just being so shocked by able to handle um, among that type of competition. So yeah, it took me a while to really process. For those who don't know, um, I qualified for their trials and finals, and I qualified for the final. So I was about less than a second shy of qualifying for the Olympics that year.
Oh, it's so
Um,
heartbreaking.
so um, yeah, honestly, I really didn't know it was, but I didn't really like. I was so like I felt like emotionally I'd gone from 0 to 100, where I wasn't mentally prepared to be in that place at all, or
Mm-hmm.
or even close. Um, So it took me a while to digest that experience and recognize and feel thankful that, this was introducing me to this uh, potential that I didn't realize was there. And so, um, yeah, I mean, I was very content with my and satisfied with my experience in college. And I wanted to, though I knew within my heart, I wanted to do everything I could to be there in 2016. Um, I really set my mind on taking it one year at a time and enjoying the rest of my collegiate experience and then going on from there.
Smart. So you said going into 2012, I mean, you didn't really kind of like you said, you weren't really sure even what to expect there. So, I mean, were you actually happy with the result or were you still upset? I just hear a second off and it sounds heartbreaking to me, but like I wasn't in your headspace. I mean, maybe that was really exciting. I remember Dan Jansen telling us that he got fourth in the Olympics, his first Olympics, and he was stoked. Like he thought he did great, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's a shame you didn't win a medal." But he was excited on his performance. So,
it's
yeah,
relative.
I guess I should have asked you, yeah, what exactly was your headspace going in there?
Yeah, I mean, really, like I remember, I kept actually a pretty religious journal of kind of the happenings, and because we had been out in Eugene 10 days before the race, so we were able to experience kind of the vibe of the Olympic trials. And I remember actually writing that the goal was really just to make the final, and actually ended up winning the prelim. So it started,
Wow.
with the prelim. I was just like, I I was so stunned by like how relaxed I felt. I think just because the stakes for me were so low, and it was actually a really beneficial evaluation tool for me to see, oh, I actually perform well when
Mm.
you hear about as an athlete like the like optimal arousal for
Mm-hmm.
competition, and I walked away from that experience being realizing that I actually perform better when I'm a bit more relaxed versus hyped.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, to answer your question, the goal was just to make the final. So then when I was able to do that and then come so close, I think I, yeah, I think the best word is just surprised. I, you'll see if I were to rewatch an interview, I'm crying in the interview, and of course, I think that was more just this like paralysis, this, you know, um, the it's hard to say I was disappointed because I truly believe that it, the Lord's will was not for me to be there that year and for, three other amazing athletes to be there. Um, but as I grow older and more mature in my, career, I recognize just how few and far between those opportunities are. And so it is
Mm-hmm.
challenging not to look back and feel a sort of sting from that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so interesting how the perspective changes. I totally get it. Totally get it. Well, so what changed? You finished college and you started running professionally and aiming toward Rio 2016. So kind of take us on that journey.
So when I graduated in 2014, I signed a contract with New Balance and was able to move to Boston, which is right near where my family lives. And it really just was such a seamless fit in terms of training environment. I was part of a newly developed team, and the New Balance headquarters are in Boston. So it really seemed to be, almost too good to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And then pretty much right off the bat, later on that fall when I started training after the summer um, for the next season, I started getting injured. It was like first a soft tissue injury, um, and then a few months later, got my first serious stress bone injury. Um, and then it seemed that every 6 months or less, I was getting the same sort of thing in different areas. And in college, I'd never had longer term serious injuries like that. So, yeah, that was new territory. Um, it challenged me to say the least, and provided a ripe opportunity for God to reveal my heart um, to me, and uh, just in the way that I would respond to, you know, the just continuous cycle of those things happening, and the anger and bitterness that I had to wrestle with, and just revealing that just how powerful running can be as an idol in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of stripping away um, layers of control and comfort, and graciously showing me that, you know, if running is my ultimate source of satisfaction and identity, then I won't be satisfied.
Oh,
So
such a
yeah, it
good
was
lesson.
happening. Right, right. And it was so humbling to go through it so many times, and also realize my pride in that. Like, I started to develop this sense of like, I've been through this before, you know, this um I feel like I've learned this lesson, and God just showing me like how, you know, like when we struggle with some good thing, you know, that we enjoy, that brings us joy, um and that it's taken from us, and we have to kind of shift and replace, you know, remind ourselves where our true identity really lies in Christ. It takes a long time, at least for me. I'm stubborn, you know, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but it takes a long time for me to um I'm, you know, I hesitate to even say to learn that lesson. I think it's just going to be a bunch of relearnings,
Yeah.
and
I'm right there with you.
that's yeah, yeah. So that was kind of the road up to Rio in 2016. Was just kind of like these total ebbs and flows of health and injury, really up until, you know, 10 weeks before the Olympic trials, I got another stress fracture in my shin, and it was the first time that, you know, I really felt like desperate before the Lord with the injury. Like, I'm just tired, you know, like I felt emotionally fatigued from a lacrosse training. And, you know, I am thankful for that time because it taught me a lot about just relying on his word as manna, you know,
Hmm.
as like my food during that time, and just uh, trusting that it would be there for me freshly every day. Uh, So getting to the starting line at the Olympic trials itself, like the fact that I was able to get healthy and with very limited training on the ground, you know, I was actually doing a lot of swimming. Um, I was able to still get to the starting line, and then, you know, actually didn't even place top three in the 5,000. I placed fifth, but then two of the gals in front of me forfeited their spot, so I was able to sneak in to fifth
Why
place.
why would you forfeit a spot on the Olympic team?
So two of the other women, Molly Huddle and Emily Infeld, had also qualified in the 10,000 meters. So yeah, so they both decided they didn't want to run the 5,000, and that was essentially what allowed me to run in the games. So that
Wow.
was an enormous gift. I still think about, you know, the moment that Emily came over to me at team processing and shared the news. You know, super super emotional.
So did you
Uh,
find out at trials or not until like way later?
So I found out the same day as the race. It was just, you know, like 3 hours later or
Mm,
something like that.
wow.
Um, yeah. So just getting a spot on the team felt like a gift in and of itself. And then, um, you know, there were 3 or 4 weeks, I think, from the trials to the games, and I got another stress fracture in my pelvis between that time, or in that
Oh
period of
my
time.
goodness.
So, uh, you know, in light of what happened in Rio, you know, like I think it is really important to share actually this part of the story, because, you know, what I always say is like everything that happened in Rio was a product and was made possible because of what God had done beforehand to prepare me
Mm.
for that event. And just, yeah, giving me a season of trial. You know, I was on crutches with the pelvis injury. You know, I was told that I could still go and compete at the games, but like I couldn't not run until the week before. I could just get on the track a couple times just to make sure my hip wasn't going to break during the race. So needless to say, it was just like I was so thankful to be there, you know, like it's like you can't go wrong. You're in the athlete village, just kind of soaking it in. But internally, it was challenging just not to be in the same routine. I had people asking what event I was swimming because I was out in the pool. So so it's just yeah, God just continued this work that He was doing in my heart to make me fully dependent on Him through that time.
And I know, because I've been through a lot of these seasons too, it's hard sometimes to know that in the middle of it, that He's actually equipping you for something. Did you recognize that, or were you just frustrated, like, okay, I thought I got it, like where were you walking into Rio in your head?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I would say it would depend on it would depend on the moment. I felt one of the things I noticed most, I'm an avid journaler and I really value, my devotional time in the morning. Um, and I just like I would start off the day so um just in complete enjoyment of devouring the word, and because it was all I had, it was like it really spoke so deeply to my heart, and always does, but like in such a powerful way through that season. So I'd start off the day feeling assured of why I was there, and that God had clearly, just because of the way things had happened, He clearly wanted me in Rio for a reason, and I had to challenge myself to not stop looking for that reason and just be where I was
Hmm.
and trust Him with how it would unfold. Um, so yeah, there were peaks and valleys in terms of like feeling assured of why I was there, but then also, by the end of the day, just feeling discouraged and frustrated, um, and honestly annoyed. Like it was just hard. Like
Yeah.
it solo sessions in the pool, that have no translation to what I really, is so hard to tell where my fitness was at. So yeah, there were ups and downs,
Hmm.
absolutely.
At Hope Sports, we know that you want sport to be fun, but in order to do that, you need to compete with freedom. The problem is, you believe that everything hinges on your score, performance, or medal count. But we believe that athletes should be able to experience joy regardless of their win-loss record. Because sport is more about the process of who you're becoming than the end result. We understand what it's like when the pressure to perform exceeds the passion for the game, which is why hundreds of athletes rediscovered their love for the game with Hope Sports. We have a workshop coming up November 15th through 17th in San Diego, California, and you do not want to miss it. It's so easy to get involved. Go to hopesports.org, sign up for the November workshop, and win like never before. So sign up today and come figure out what you've been missing. It could be the key you need to find success in your career. So walk us through Rio. You actually got to compete, but as you were being prepared, it was not exactly what you were expecting, I don't think. So walk us through, because you made headlines worldwide. It was one of the biggest and brightest stories of the games, but not for reasons you would expect. So tell us what happened.
During the preliminary round of the 5K, we start off pretty conservatively. And that's exactly what happened, which was completely to my benefit. As I said, I had not gotten a lot of, I'd been working really hard in the pool, but I wasn't quite sure where my fitness was at. So we started off at a pace that I could handle. And about 3K into the race, right where it usually starts to pick up, it did. And I was in the very back of the pack. And, I guess there was just some sort of sudden pace change up front in the pack, and there was a domino effect. And a couple people started, the gal in front of me fell, and my foot got caught under her. And little did I know I'd torn my ACL and meniscus. But yeah, I was able to get up, and both of us, this woman, Nikki Hamblin from New Zealand, and I, were both able to help each other to our feet, and then finish the race. Um, and then later, when I couldn't walk, I found out that I had torn my ACL and meniscus. Um, so, in short, that is what happened. Um, but you know, I like it. There were so many small moments and big moments throughout my experience, even before that, the race in Rio, where God had just placed people in my life or encouragement in my life to like give me strength in the moment where I had to make a decision. Like, I'm hurt. What do I do? And it just had happened so quickly that, the decision to get up and help this other girl from New Zealand, like that is not, it happened so quickly. Like, I know from the bottom of my heart, I can't take any credit for that. That's not the way that I'm wired. If I had the same goals as everyone else out there to go and to compete in the final. And so the fact that it was an instinct to get up and help her is just the work of the Holy Spirit. As I said, he had made me so dependent on him in the time leading up to it. And things had been so hard that I had no choice but to rely on his strength and be fueled by his joy. And they're like, as I said, there were so many little things that had happened. I'll just share one quick thing. There was an Olympic chaplain named Madeline Manning Mims, who had shared a story. So she's an Olympian. She ran in the 68 and then one other Olympic. She's a several-time Olympian. She just shared an experience of back when she ran in the Olympic Games, and she was in a relay and she had hurt her knee. And in the middle of the race, it was a 4x4, and like coming around the bend with 100 meters to go, she could feel her knee. I mean, it was affecting her stride, and she remembers praying, "Lord, help me." And she finished the race, but she does not remember that last 100 meters. And several years later, she went back to the track where I'm forgetting where it was, where that games was held, and she just realized, like, this is, I don't remember it, but this is where the Lord carried me through. And, she shared a verse from Ephesians 3:20. Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all that we could ask or think. And then it goes on. And I was so inspired by that story. And I'd written on my hand, actually, that day, now to him who is able. And so when I fell, I remember, like, this is just the work of God. Like, everything's happening so quickly, but I was just like, Madeline, I thought about her, and I thought about how the Lord had carried her through. And that really, that just spoke through me and allowed me to continue on despite, knowing something was seriously wrong with my knee. So, it just, I'm just so thankful to be an instrument in this larger story that the Lord was telling through what happened there that day.
Did you realize in those moments that it was a big deal?
I had no idea that it would receive the media that it did whatsoever. No idea. Of course, this is the 5K prelim, so it's at like 8:30 in the morning or something. There were barely any people in the stands. And so I think that is such a testament to the way the Lord is too. I mean, the way that it happened, I am thankful. I believe that I belonged at the Olympic Games, and I don't want to like self-deprecate, but I was not in a position to medal or be even close that year. And so the fact that it would happen to me and another gal who was in a similar position at the prelim of a race, no one is there. Like, that's just the Lord is just wraps himself in humility. Mm-hmm. The whole situation was wrapped in humility. And so I think that's such a cool piece of like how it happened and the fact that it points to him. So yeah, it was really cool.
When I love reading, because of course I have to do my due diligence and stalk you a little bit before we talk. But I was reading some things that Nikki had said too, and because she just curled up into a ball when she fell in front of you, and in slow mo, I can totally see your knee go out too. That's that couldn't have felt good. But she said she was just curled up in this ball, and you kept saying, you have to get up, you have to finish the race. And she said, if you hadn't told her that, she said, I might still be laying in a ball on the track, but you, like, just like you said, like God was preparing you and feeding you that message, like you just have to get up and finish. And she got up, but then that's when your knee started to give out and you collapsed, and she helped you back up. And you eventually went on, you had 4 laps left, I believe. Was that right?
Yeah, something like that. Yep, 4
So
or 5.
you ran the last 4 laps on a torn ACL and meniscus. It was just incredible, and you guys embracing after it was over. It was just those are the parts that the rest of the world saw, and understood immediately. And that's what was so beautiful about the Olympics, right? So it's amazing when people can do these great feats and win these medals, but there's those moments, those really human, humble moments where you realize that just your humanity is way more important, and then just being a person of love and to not worry about what's happening to your result, but you care enough to pick up the person next to you and help them cross that finish line or get up and go. That's why it's so beautiful, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I can't take any credit for the event itself and how it went down, because it doesn't belong to me. But at the same time, I agree with you. I do think it's amazing. I'm stunned by it and grateful to just be a part of it. Because it really has broadened my platform and ability, or means through which I can use this sport to point to the Lord and point to, what really matters.
So cool. Well, afterward, I'm wondering, I want to hear about your kind of post-Olympic experience, because I know, like, President Obama, even said you guys are exactly what the Olympic spirit and the American spirit should be all about. You and Nikki were nominated for the Laureus World Sports Awards. You were nominated for the best sporting moment. Was it like a whirlwind? What all happened after that? And what was that experience like?
Right. Oh, it was so overwhelming at first. I think for both Nikki and I know for both Nikki and I, because I've had a chance to speak with her a few times afterward. And both of us are pretty introverted, despite opportunities like this that we have to speak to larger audiences. But the next day we had a slew of interviews, and we were still just emotionally processing it ourselves. And Nikki actually was still gearing up to run the final a few days later. So I can imagine what it was like for her. But and even going home afterward, and just, having to get surgery, and thankfully was able to, my mom is a nurse, and, was so cared for, and just kind of nourished in that time. And was able to just be like, have a small circle around me, because it was so overwhelming, and just it allowed me time to digest the experience and feel just thankful for, just process all of the emotions that came with it. And so, since that time, of just kind of having surgery and recovering from that, I do still feel a deep calling to continue. Clearly, I'm still running now, and still doing the best that I can to make it to the Olympic trials in 2020. I sense that the Lord isn't done with me in this realm yet. And I know there is still potential to be released. So I've been continually humbled by just how long it's taken for me to just feel like myself again. I feel like I've had glimpses of it. But my injury is such a unique an experience for an elite distance runner. There aren't many practitioners who have worked with someone like me before. So I'm sort of a case study, and it's taken time to find the right people. And then, of course, I've gotten married and moved in that time as well. So just a lot of transition and adjustments. And so what I just continue to, again, relearn is just that it's okay to still sometimes I get frustrated, because when you care a lot about something, and have this dream of reaching my potential and making it, to the 2020 Olympics or another Olympics. And when, I still continue to have little glitches and things pop up because my body isn't quite balanced yet, I do still get frustrated. And what God's reminding me that it's okay to still have that dream. You can still believe in it, but you just can't, you can't envision what it looks like to get there. You'll never know, And if I learned one thing from Rio, it's just that God can take our dreams and reroute them for His glory and for our ultimate benefit. And that's exactly what He did in Rio. And so I just need to trust that from now probably for the rest of my life, it's never going to happen as pictured or as anticipated. And I'm just learning to find His peace and joy in that. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful and so true. Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. I've been through a lot of these seasons myself, so I'm relating a lot to what you're saying. So, what kind of advice would you give to an up and coming athlete?
Oh, that's a great question that I get asked quite a bit, and I always feel dissatisfied with my response because it is a little bit cliched. But one thing that I always caution against is just getting too how do I say this? I guess the best advice is to be sure you're cultivating joy in your pursuit, whether it's sport or anything else. Because I think, the trend now in our culture is just early specialization and, just hyper focus and hyper volume, especially in runners early on. And the potential for burnout is so strong, physically and psychologically and emotionally. So yeah, I look fondly, although I wouldn't sometimes in my high school experiences, I wouldn't have said the same, but I do look back fondly upon those experiences because, we just kept a really lighthearted atmosphere at practice, and I was not overdoing it in terms of my actual physical training. And yeah, it just takes time for, I think so many of the athletes that I compete against will say the same thing, where it just, so much of success is just layers of consistency. And so if you try to squeeze too much out of yourself too soon, there's a definite risk in that. And then another thing that I think is even more important is just along the way, asking the why question. Why is this sport so important to you? And why does it bring you joy? And can it ultimately satisfy you? It's so hard. I certainly didn't have the maturity to ask that question when I was in high school. But I think the simple why question mark, is a great place to start. And hopefully can just start getting the wheels turning about the deeper things. Even if an athlete hasn't experienced challenge in their sport quite yet, it will come inevitably in some form. So the earlier you can start finding your identity in the right things, the better.
So good. Well, so I guess how can we follow you online or cheer you on the way to Tokyo in 2020?
So both my Instagram and Twitter handles are at Abbey _Abbey_Dags, my maiden name. And I'm on Facebook as well. Abbey Cooper I just have an athlete page on there. So yeah, would appreciate your support.
Of course. We'll make sure to link to that in the show notes so everybody can just click on that and follow you because we definitely want to cheer you on. Abby, thank you so much for coming on, for inspiring us, for sharing your journey, for being so open and vulnerable with all of those things. We really appreciate it. And I think it's going to help all of us grow a little bit more.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for such insightful questions and just being able to relate through your experience.
Isn't she incredible? Hearing her whole tumultuous road to Rio gives so much backstory to that moment on the track that went viral around the world. She had already been through so many trials and difficulties and was building her identity throughout it all. So falling at the Olympics was just an opportunity to once again get up and keep going. I hope that you feel inspired today to keep going through those hard moments and to remember that your worth isn't wrapped up in your situation or your performance. If you're an athlete and these themes are hitting home for you, then check out the work that Hope Sports is doing. Hope Sports has upcoming workshops and programs for athletes looking to develop a value-based performance mentality. Just check out the show notes for more information. Up next week, we have Jonathan Horton sharing about the ups and downs of his 28-year career in gymnastics that includes 2 Olympic medals. I'm your host, Laura Wilkinson. Thanks for listening. This podcast is produced by Evo Terra and Simpler Media. For more information on Hope Sports and to access the complete archives, please visit hopesports.org.